My name is Alex, and I never thought I'd be telling a story like this. It all began when my girlfriend Emily started acting strange, stranger than I could have ever imagined. Emily and I had been together for over 2 years, and for the most part, our relationship was perfect. We shared the same interests, had the same sense of humor, and couldn't get enough of each other's company. But something changed one fateful summer evening, and it was the beginning of a descent into madness I could never have predicted. It was a warm, balmy night when Emily and I decided to take a walk in the park near our apartment. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the grass, and the air was filled with the gentle hum of crickets. It was the kind of night that made you feel alive, and Emily and I relished the opportunity to spend it together. As we strolled hand in hand, I couldn't help but admire how the moonlight played on her features, casting a soft glow over her face. She had always been beautiful, but that night, she looked positively ethereal. But then, as we reached the center of the park, Emily suddenly stopped in her tracks. Her grip on my hand tightened, and her eyes, once bright and full of life, took on a distant, vacant look. "Emily, what's wrong?" I asked, my concern growing. She didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge my presence. Instead, she began to mutter under her breath, her words unintelligible. It was as if she had been transported to another world, one that I couldn't see or understand. I tried to snap her out of it, gently shaking her shoulder and calling her name, but it was as if she were in a trance. Her muttering grew louder, more frantic, and I could see the fear in her eyes. "Emily, snap out of it," I pleaded, my heart racing. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the episode ended. Emily blinked as if waking from a dream and looked at me with a bewildered expression. "What just happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. I couldn't answer, couldn't comprehend what had just occurred. I was relieved that she was back to herself, but a nagging unease settled in the pit of my stomach. We decided to cut our walk short and headed back to our apartment. Emily seemed shaken, but she couldn't provide any explanation for her strange behavior. She blamed it on stress and fatigue, and I wanted to believe her. But as the days went by, Emily's odd episodes became more frequent. She would zone out at random moments, her eyes losing focus as she muttered incomprehensible words. Sometimes, she would wake up in the middle of the night screaming in terror, unable to remember her nightmares. I was worried sick about her, but she insisted that she was fine, that it was just a phase. She brushed off my concerns, even though I could see the toll it was taking on her. Her once vibrant personality had become muted and withdrawn. Then one evening, as we were having dinner, Emily did something that sent chills down my spine. She suddenly stopped eating, her fork hovering halfway to her mouth, and her eyes locked onto mine with a malevolent intensity I had never seen before. "Emily, what's wrong?" I asked, my voice trembling. She didn't respond, didn't blink. Instead, she began to speak, but it wasn't her voice that came out of her mouth. It was a low, guttural growl filled with an otherworldly malevolence that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. "Leave now," the voice hissed. "Leave before it's too late." I recoiled in horror, pushing my chair back from the table. Emily's eyes cleared, and she looked at me with confusion and fear. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling. I couldn't find the words to explain what had just happened. I felt like I was losing my mind, like reality itself was unraveling before my eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in bed, listening to Emily's soft breathing beside me. I didn't know what to do, who to turn to for help. It felt like I was trapped in a waking nightmare, and I couldn't escape. The days that followed were a blur of fear and uncertainty. Emily's episodes grew worse, and I could see the toll it was taking on her physically and emotionally. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her once lustrous hair had lost its shine. I tried to research her symptoms online, but I couldn't find any answers. It was as if whatever was afflicting her defied explanation. I begged her to see a doctor, but she refused, insisting that it was just a phase and that it would pass. Then one evening, as I was sitting in the living room, I heard Emily talking to herself in the bedroom. It wasn't the muttering I had grown accustomed to. It was a full-blown conversation, as if she were speaking to someone else. I tiptoed to the bedroom door and listened, my heart pounding in my chest. Emily's voice was filled with anger and desperation, and she was pleading with someone, or something. "No, please, I can't do it," she sobbed. "You promised you would leave him alone." I pushed the bedroom door open and what I saw sent shockwaves through my body. Emily was sitting on the edge of the bed, her eyes wide with terror as she spoke to an empty corner of the room. "Who are you talking to?" I demanded, my voice trembling. Emily turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and despair. "It won't leave me alone, Alex. It's always there, watching, waiting. It wants something from me, something I can't give." I didn't know what to say, how to help her. I felt utterly powerless in the face of whatever was tormenting her. That night, I decided to set up a camera in the bedroom, hoping to capture evidence of Emily's strange behavior. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her episodes, something sinister and inexplicable. As I reviewed the footage the next morning, my blood ran cold. In the darkness of the bedroom, I could see Emily sitting on the bed, her eyes vacant as she spoke to the empty corner of the room. But there was something else, something I couldn't explain. A shadowy figure, barely visible in the dim light, seemed to materialize in the corner of the room. It was tall and hunched, its form shifting and contorting as if it were made of smoke and darkness. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was as if I had captured evidence of the malevolent presence that had taken hold of Emily. But what was it? And what did it want from her? I decided to seek help from a paranormal investigator, hoping that they could provide answers and a way to help Emily. The investigator, a man named Dr. Mitchell, arrived at our apartment with a team of researchers and equipment. They conducted a thorough investigation, using electromagnetic field detectors and audio recording devices. As they worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that the apartment was filled with an oppressive energy, as if something was watching us. Hours passed and the investigators finally sat down with me to discuss their findings. Dr. Mitchell had a grave expression on his face, and I could tell that he had seen something that disturbed him. "We've detected unusual energy patterns in your apartment," he began. "And we've captured some disturbing audio recordings." He played a recording for me and I felt a chill run down my spine. It was Emily's voice, but it was distorted, filled with anguish and despair. She was pleading with someone, or something. "I can't do it," she sobbed. "I can't give you what you want." The recording made my blood freeze. I had heard those words before, in the bedroom that night when Emily had spoken to the empty corner. Dr. Mitchell continued, "We believe that your girlfriend is being tormented by a malevolent entity, one that feeds on her fear and despair. It's a parasitic entity that has attached itself to her, and it won't let go without a fight." I was horrified by the revelation. I couldn't believe that something so sinister could have taken hold of Emily. I asked Dr. Mitchell if there was a way to remove the entity, to free her from its torment. He nodded solemnly. "There is a ritual that can banish the entity, but it won't be easy. We'll need to perform it tonight during the peak of its activity, and we'll need your help." I agreed without hesitation, desperate to free Emily from the entity's grip. Dr. Mitchell and his team spent the day preparing for the ritual, gathering candles, incense, and other tools. As night fell, we gathered in the living room, ready to confront the malevolent entity. The atmosphere in the apartment was heavy with tension, and I could feel the entity's presence lurking in the shadows. Dr. Mitchell began the ritual, reciting incantations and performing sacred gestures. The room seemed to come alive with energy, as if the very air were charged with power. As the ritual reached its climax, I heard a low, guttural growl emanate from the darkness. The entity was fighting back, resisting its banishment. The room grew colder and the candles flickered as if they were about to be extinguished. But Dr. Mitchell pressed on, his voice unwavering. He called upon higher powers to aid us in our battle against the malevolent entity. I could feel the weight of its presence lifting, as if it were being torn away from Emily. And then, with a final triumphant incantation, Dr. Mitchell banished the entity from our apartment. The room seemed to brighten, and I could feel a sense of peace wash over me. It was finally over. Emily sat on the floor, her eyes wide with bewilderment. She looked at me as if she had just woken from a nightmare. What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. I helped her to her feet and held her tightly. "It's over, Emily. The entity is gone. You're safe now." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. It was as if she had been freed from a prison of fear and despair. In the days that followed, Emily seemed like her old self again. Her strange episodes had ceased, and her vibrant personality had returned. We couldn't explain what had happened, but we were grateful that it was finally over. As I sat with Emily one evening holding her hand, she looked at me with gratitude and love in her eyes. "Thank you, Alex, you saved me." I smiled and kissed her forehead. "I would do anything for you, Emily. I'm just glad you're okay." But even as we embraced, I couldn't help but wonder what had really happened. What had caused Emily to be tormented by the malevolent entity in the first place? And I couldn't shake the feeling that there were secrets lurking in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to research the paranormal, desperate to find answers. I discovered stories of entities that attached themselves to vulnerable individuals, feeding on their fear and despair. They were ancient and malevolent, and they would stop at nothing to claim their victims. I couldn't help but wonder if there were others out there, like Emily, who were being tormented by these sinister entities. And I knew that I had to find a way to protect them, to banish the darkness that lurked in the shadows. As I delved deeper into the world of the paranormal, I couldn't shake the feeling that our battle against the malevolent entity was far from over. There were forces beyond our understanding, lurking in the darkness, waiting to be uncovered. And I was determined to confront them no matter the cost. For in the shadows, in the hidden corners of the world, there were secrets waiting to be uncovered, and I was determined to uncover them. The darkness may have taken hold of Emily, but it would not claim any more victims on my watch. Story 2. It was a sweltering summer night in the heart of the city. The relentless heat had driven most of the residents indoors, seeking refuge in the cool embrace of air conditioning. But not me. I had always been drawn to the city's nocturnal side, its secrets and shadows that came alive after dark. With my headphones on and the city's pulse reverberating through my veins, I decided to take a late-night walk. The streets were nearly empty, bathed in the pale glow of streetlights that flickered like dying stars. I walked with purpose, the rhythmic beat of my music matching the cadence of my footsteps. As I turned down a dimly lit alley, my senses heightened. There was something unsettling about the deserted streets, a feeling that I couldn't quite shake. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone or something lurking in the shadows. There was no one there, of course, just the empty alley and the distant hum of the city. I forced myself to shake off the unease and continued my journey. It was when I reached the bridge that spans the river that I first noticed it, the shadowy figure that seemed to materialize out of thin air. It was a tall, imposing silhouette, shrouded in darkness and devoid of any discernible features. It stood beneath a flickering streetlight, motionless, as if waiting for something. My heart skipped a beat as I quickened my pace. I tried to convince myself that it was just a trick of the light, a figment of my overactive imagination. But as I glanced over my shoulder again, the figure was still there, closer now and undeniably real. I continued to walk, my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself to stay calm, that there was a logical explanation for this. Maybe it was just a late-night wanderer, lost in thought like I was. But the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach told me otherwise. As I crossed the bridge and descended a flight of stairs that led to the riverbank, I realized that the figure was following me. Its movements were slow and deliberate, always keeping a fixed distance. I could hear the soft, rhythmic echo of its footsteps, a haunting accompaniment to the music in my ears. I considered turning back, confronting the figure, demanding an explanation for its unsettling presence. But a deep sense of dread held me back. I knew that whatever or whoever this was, it was no ordinary stranger. I walked along the river, my footsteps echoing in the desolate night. The city's skyline loomed overhead, a dark, towering presence that seemed to press down on me. The figure continued to follow, its presence an ominous shadow at the edge of my perception. I couldn't take it anymore. I stopped in my tracks, ripping the headphones from my ears and turning to face the figure. It was closer now, just a few yards away, and I could see that it wore a long, tattered coat that billowed in the night breeze. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice quivering with a mixture of fear and anger. The figure remained silent, its form shrouded in darkness. I took a step closer, my heart pounding in my chest. I said, "Who are you? Why are you following me?" Still there was no response. The figure seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, its presence a looming, oppressive force. I took a deep breath, my instincts screaming at me to run, to escape this menacing presence. But I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. I had to know who or what I was dealing with. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Finally, the figure spoke, its voice a hollow, whispering rasp that felt cold. "I seek redemption." The words hung in the air like a sinister omen. Redemption? What did that mean? And why did this figure's presence fill me with such an overwhelming sense of dread? I took another step closer, my curiosity overpowering my fear. Redemption for what? The figure hesitated, as if struggling to find the right words. For the sins of the past. For the darkness that haunts my soul. I felt a chill run down my spine. The figure's words were cryptic, filled with a sense of profound sorrow and regret. I couldn't help but be drawn in, as if I were unraveling a mystery that I was never meant to uncover. "Who are you?" I asked again, my voice trembling. The figure finally stepped into the dim glow of a nearby streetlight, revealing a face that was both familiar and utterly alien. Its features were contorted, twisted by some unseen torment, and its eyes bore into mine with a haunting intensity. "I am a reflection of your own darkness," it said, its voice echoing in my mind. "I am the embodiment of your deepest fears and regrets." I stumbled back, a sense of dread washing over me. It couldn't be true, couldn't be real. This figure, this shadowy presence, it was a manifestation of my own inner demons. "Get away from me," I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. But the figure remained, its eyes never leaving mine. "I cannot be banished so easily, for I am a part of you." I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing in the empty streets. The figure followed, always at a fixed distance, as if it were tethered to me by an invisible thread. Panic coursed through my veins as I sprinted through the city, desperate to escape the relentless pursuit of my own darkness. I didn't know how long I ran or where I was headed. All I knew was that I had to get away from the figure, from the haunting presence that threatened to consume me. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I couldn't stop. Eventually, I found myself in a deserted park surrounded by trees and darkness. I collapsed onto a park bench, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked around, expecting to see the figure closing in on me. But it was gone. I sat there in the darkness, my mind reeling from the encounter. The figure had vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my fear. I couldn't deny the truth any longer. The figure, the darkness, it was a part of me, a manifestation of my own inner demons. It had followed me, haunted me, and forced me to confront the darkness that lurked within my own soul. As I sat in the park, the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, casting a faint glow over the city. I knew that I could never escape the shadowy figure, for it was a part of me, a reflection of my own fears and regrets. And as I watched the city awaken, I couldn't help but wonder if redemption was truly possible, if I could ever find a way to confront and conquer the darkness that dwelled within me. Story 3. My name is Ethan, and I've always had a fascination with the woods. Ever since I was a child, I would spend hours exploring the dense forests that surrounded my family's cabin. The trees, the wildlife, the feeling of being surrounded by nature's secrets. It all drew me in like a moth to a flame. But as I would soon discover, some secrets are best left untouched. It was a crisp, moonlit night when it all began. The woods had always been a place of comfort and solace for me. But that night, as I ventured deeper into the forest than ever before, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Something was watching me. I had brought my trusty flashlight, but even its beam seemed feeble in the vast expanse of the trees. I pushed onward, the crunch of leaves and twigs beneath my boots the only sound in the otherwise silent night. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows, and my imagination played tricks on me. I thought I saw movement in the corner of my eye, heard faint whispers carried by the wind, and felt the temperature drop whenever I paused to catch my breath. Still, I brushed it off as my own paranoia and continued my journey. Hours passed, and I had lost all sense of time and direction. The moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie silhouettes of the trees on the forest floor. That's when I stumbled upon it, a clearing bathed in moonlight with an ancient gnarled tree at its center. The tree was unlike anything I had ever seen. Its bark was a deep, almost obsidian black, and its branches twisted and contorted as if they were reaching out for something, or someone. The air around it felt heavy and oppressive, and the silence was suffocating. Despite my unease, I couldn't tear my eyes away from the tree. It had an otherworldly beauty, a sinister allure that drew me closer. I reached out to touch its bark, my fingers trembling as they made contact with the rough surface. That's when I heard it, a soft, mournful whisper like the sigh of a dying breeze. It seemed to emanate from the tree itself, as if it held the secrets of the forest within its ancient heart. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. The whisper grew louder, more insistent, and I could make out words, faint and fragmented. "Guardian. Forsaken. Beware." I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. The tree, the clearing, the whole forest. It felt wrong, like a nightmare brought to life. Panic gripped me and I turned to run, but the path I had followed had vanished, replaced by an impenetrable wall of trees. I was trapped. The whispering grew louder, more frantic, and the shadows seemed to come alive, twisting and writhing as if they had a life of their own. I had to get out of there, had to escape the suffocating darkness closing in around me. Frantically, I retraced my steps, stumbling over roots and underbrush as I tried to find my way back to the safety of the cabin. But the forest had changed, as if it had rearranged itself to keep me captive. The trees loomed like ancient sentinels, their branches reaching out to ensnare me. Hours turned into days, or at least it felt that way. I was exhausted, my body aching from the relentless pursuit of escape. The whispers had grown louder, more menacing, and I could feel a malevolent presence lurking just beyond the edge of my vision. I had lost all sense of time and reality. The forest had become a nightmarish labyrinth, and I was its unwilling prisoner. I knew then that I had trespassed into something beyond my comprehension, something ancient and vengeful. Just when I thought I couldn't go on any longer, I stumbled upon a small, dilapidated cabin hidden deep within the woods. It was a decrepit, rotting structure, but it offered shelter from the relentless darkness that had pursued me. Inside, I found a dusty, tattered journal on a wooden table. Its pages were filled with the frenzied writings of a previous occupant, someone who had also been ensnared by the forest's sinister grip. "Guardian of the woods," the journal read. "Beware its whispers, its seductive call. It promises secrets, power, but it's a trap, a malevolent force that feeds on the lost and the forsaken. I have seen things in these woods, things that should never have existed." The journal spoke of a ritual, a way to appease the guardian and escape its clutches. Desperate and terrified, I followed the instructions, reciting the incantation as the whispers grew louder and the shadows closed in around me. Suddenly, the cabin shook as if caught in a violent storm. The walls groaned and the roof threatened to collapse. I could hear the guardian's furious howls, its rage echoing through the trees. But then, as suddenly as it had begun, the chaos stopped. The cabin was still, and the forest outside seemed to have lost interest in me. I cautiously stepped outside, and to my astonishment, I found myself standing at the edge of the woods, just a stone's throw from the cabin. The guardian had released me. I stumbled back to my family's cabin, disheveled and traumatized. I didn't speak of my ordeal, not wanting to burden my loved ones with the horrors I had witnessed. But the memory of that night, of the guardian and the whispers, haunted my dreams. Years passed, and I tried to put the forest and its malevolent guardian behind me. I got married, had children of my own, and moved far away from those cursed woods. But the memory of that night was always there, lurking in the shadows of my mind. Then, one fateful night as I lay in bed, I heard it. The soft, mournful whisper, the same one I had heard in the clearing so long ago. It echoed through the darkness, filling my room with dread. "Guardian forsaken, beware." My heart raced, and I knew that the guardian had not forgotten me. It had followed me, waiting for the right moment to reclaim what it believed was rightfully its own. I never went back to the woods, but the guardian's whispers grew louder with each passing night. It seemed to seep into every corner of my life, poisoning my thoughts and driving me to the brink of madness. I tried to protect my family, to shield them from the malevolent force that had taken hold of me, but it was futile. The guardian's whispers grew louder, more insistent, until I could no longer resist its call. One night, as the moon hung low in the sky, I left my home and ventured into the darkness, drawn by the sinister allure of the guardian and the secrets it promised. The woods had claimed me once again, and this time I knew there was no escape. As I walked deeper into the forest, the shadows closed in around me, and the whispers became a deafening cacophony. I was no longer a trespasser. I was a willing servant, bound to the guardian for eternity. And so I remain lost in the depths of the woods, a forsaken soul ensnared by the malevolent force that dwells within. The guardian's whispers are my only companions now, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks in the heart of the woods beyond midnight. Story 4. My family had just moved into a new home. It was a large, 2-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the street as we pulled into the driveway. We were all exhausted from the move, but we couldn't wait to settle into our new place. The house had a strange aura about it, even from the outside. It stood eerily still in the growing darkness, its windows reflecting the fading twilight. As we stepped out of the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, lurking in the shadows. My wife Sarah and I exchanged nervous glances, but we brushed off our unease as a product of the long day. We had 2 kids, Emily and Jack, who were equally eager to explore their new home. We grabbed our bags and headed inside. The interior of the house was grand, but it had an old-world charm that creeped me out. The wooden floors creaked with each step, and the walls were adorned with faded wallpaper that hinted at the house's long history. We started unpacking, hoping that making the house our own would ease our discomfort. That first night was restless. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that something was off. The house seemed to groan and sigh as if it held secrets within its walls. I finally drifted off to sleep, but my dreams were plagued by dark shadows and whispered voices. In the days that followed, strange occurrences became a regular part of our lives. Objects would move on their own, and we would hear faint, disembodied footsteps in the hallway at night. Sarah and I tried to reassure each other that it was just our imaginations playing tricks on us, but deep down we knew something wasn't right. One evening, as I was helping Emily with her homework in the dining room, I caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure out of the corner of my eye. I turned, but there was nothing there. Emily looked at me, concern in her eyes. "Daddy, I saw it too," she whispered. "What did you see?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. It looked like a tall man, but he was all black like a shadow. He was standing by the door. I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't want to scare my daughter, so I tried to dismiss it. "It must have been your imagination, sweetie. This house is just new to us, that's all." But as the days turned into weeks, the encounters with the shadowy figure became more frequent. Jack claimed to have seen it as well, always lurking in the corners of his room. Sarah and I decided it was time to investigate. We did some research on the house's history and discovered that it had been built in the late 19th century. Several families had lived here over the years, but none had stayed for long. There were rumors of tragedy and strange occurrences associated with the house, but no concrete details. One night, after putting the kids to bed, Sarah and I decided to stay up and see if we could catch a glimpse of the shadowy figure ourselves. We sat in the living room, the only source of light coming from a single lamp. Hours passed in silence, but nothing happened. Sarah was beginning to nod off when I suddenly saw movement in the hallway. I motioned for her to be quiet and pointed toward the shadowy figure. There it was, just as the children had described. A tall, dark silhouette stood in the hallway, unmoving. We watched in terror as it seemed to glide closer, its form becoming more defined. It had a human shape, but its features were obscured by the impenetrable darkness. My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to make sense of what I was seeing. Sarah's grip on my hand tightened, and I could see the fear in her eyes. The figure was now at the entrance of the living room, just a few feet away from us. Then, without warning, it vanished. One moment it was there, and the next it was gone, leaving us in stunned silence. We decided it was time to seek professional help. We contacted a paranormal investigator named Dr. Henderson, who had experience dealing with cases like ours. He arrived a few days later with a team of researchers and equipment. Dr. Henderson conducted a thorough investigation of the house, using various tools to measure electromagnetic fields and detect any unusual energy patterns. The team also set up cameras and audio recorders in different rooms. As we watched the monitors in the living room, we saw shadows darting across the hallway and heard faint whispers on the audio recordings. Dr. Henderson's team seemed both excited and unnerved by the evidence they were collecting. After a long night of investigation, Dr. Henderson sat us down in the living room to discuss his findings. "There's definitely something strange happening in this house," he began. "We've captured unexplained phenomena on our equipment, and I believe there's a strong presence here." "What can we do about it?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Henderson looked thoughtful. "I recommend a more in-depth investigation, including a psychic medium who can try to communicate with whatever is in this house. It's possible that it's a residual energy or a trapped spirit." We agreed to the medium's involvement, desperate for answers. The following week, a woman named Eliza arrived at our home. She had a calm demeanor and a soothing presence that immediately put us at ease. Eliza began her investigation by walking through the house, her eyes closed as if she were tuning into something beyond our perception. She stopped in the hallway where we had seen the shadowy figure and gasped softly. "There's a strong energy here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a presence that's trapped, unable to move on. It's filled with anger and sadness." She continued to explore the house, describing the sensations and emotions she was picking up on. As she entered Jack's room, her expression changed. "This is where it's strongest," she said. "The entity seems to be fixated on your son." We exchanged worried glances. Eliza suggested conducting a seance in Jack's room to try and communicate with the entity. We agreed, hoping it would provide us with some answers and a way to help our son. That night we gathered in Jack's room, the lights dimmed and a single candle flickering on the floor. Eliza sat in the center and we joined hands in a circle. She began to speak softly, calling out to the entity. The room grew colder and we could see our breath in the air. Suddenly, Jack's toys started moving on their own as if manipulated by invisible hands. Emily gasped, and I squeezed her hand to reassure her. "Who are you?" Eliza asked, her voice steady. A low, guttural voice echoed through the room, sending shivers down our spines. "I am the guardian. I watch. I protect." "Protect?" Eliza questioned. "Protect whom?" "Jack," the voice replied, sending a chill through the room. "He is mine to protect." We exchanged frightened glances. Eliza continued to communicate with the entity, trying to understand its motives. It seemed to believe that Jack was in danger, and that it needed to keep him safe at all costs. As the seance went on, the entity's messages grew more frantic and aggressive. It warned us to leave the house, to take Jack away from this place. It claimed that there were other malevolent entities in the house, and it was the only thing standing between us and them. We were terrified, unsure of what to believe. Eliza finally closed the seance and we sat in Jack's room trying to process everything we had just experienced. The room felt heavy with the presence of the entity, and we knew that we couldn't stay in the house any longer. Over the next few days, we packed up our belongings and made arrangements to stay with Sarah's parents while we figured out our next steps. Eliza blessed the house and performed a cleansing ritual, hoping to drive away the malevolent entities that had taken residence there. As we drove away from the house for the last time, I couldn't help but look back at it in the rearview mirror. It stood there, looming in the distance, a dark and foreboding presence that seemed to watch us go. We never returned to that house, and we tried to put the terrifying ordeal behind us. Jack seemed to recover from the trauma, and our lives slowly returned to normal. But we would always carry the memory of the shadowed guardian and the malevolent entities that had haunted our home. To this day, I can't help but wonder about the true nature of the entity that had claimed to protect us. Was it a benevolent force, or was it something more sinister, using our fear and vulnerability to its advantage? One thing was certain: we would never forget the shadowed guardian and the nightmare that had unfolded in our new home. And as we drove away from that cursed house, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still watching, still waiting in the depths of the darkness.